Hello, you sexy YouTuber. Now, if you're a web developer or you simply build online applications, then have you ever considered adding AI into your forms? Now, adding AI into your forms is going to make it much quicker and easier for your customers to fill out data for you. However, if you're like me, the thought of adding AI sounds complicated, then fear not. Now, Microsoft has recently done all .NET web developers a solid because they've released a bunch of free components that have AI embedded into them. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you how you can get going with these components. You can install everything for free. And best of all, I'm also going to show you how you can install an AI server and pick a large language model so you can do a bunch of local, cool AI related tasks. So if this sounds good to you, carry on watching because I guarantee you're going to learn something cool. The only other thing for me to say is that there is a related tutorial below, so you can look at that in the description. And also don't forget to lightly click on subscribe and like if you get value from this video. But with that said, let's look at smart components. In order to get going with smart components, you're going to need to do two main tasks. Now, the first one is to install the components in your website, and the second one is to install an AI server. Now, don't panic if the thought of installing an AI server sounds daunting right now, because within this video, I'm also going to show you how to install a free local AI large language model server called Olimar. So you can get going with Olimar by going to olimar.com. And if we scroll down here, you can see that we've got versions for Mac, Linux, and Windows. And clicking on the big download button, we're going to be able to download the client of our choice. Now, after we've downloaded Olimar, you'll see here that if I click on models, we've got a bunch of different large language models that we can install. So we've got Wizard, LM, Mixtral, Mistral, Gemma, Llama 2, Code, Gemma. And if we scroll down, you can see there's about 40 or 50 different large language models. Now, assuming that you've installed the Olimar client, your first task is to install a model locally. And we do that in the terminal. So you can see here that I've got this Olimar, so OLLAMA run. And then at the end, you put in the model that you want to install. Now, for this video, I'm using Llama 2. And this is a model created by Meta. Now, if you look on the Smart Components website, I would say that the caveat is that this is still in beta. And they do say that the AI returned by this model is not the best. However, it is free and it means you don't have to pay for OpenAI. Now, once you run this command, assuming that you've not got the model installed already, it will go off and download everything for you. And a caveat here is this model is about 7 to 9 gigabytes in size. So you're probably not going to want to install a bunch of these different models locally because it is going to eat up your hard drive size. So as you can see, installing a local AI server is definitely nothing to worry about. I managed to get mine up and running within 15 minutes, which is pretty impressive really. Now, after you have your AI server, the only other thing we need to do is actually install our smart components. So let's jump over to Visual Studio and I'll walk you through my demo website. Now, it's also probably worth mentioning that my sample site that I'm about to show you is available for you to have a look at in your own time from my GitHub. So you don't need to worry about copying code from YouTube. And if you want to access it, just head over to my GitHub, which is John D. Jones-POC. From here, if you go to repositories, and within here, you can see the smart components with local AI. So go in here, clone it, and off you go. Now, for this video, we're going to be using Razor Pages. However, you're free to use any rendering engine you want inside of .NET. Now, just so you know how to set this website up here, if you just go to create a new project, I've selected ASP.NET Core Web App, and I'm using .NET 9 for this in preview mode. So once I click on my solution, what we need to do is make sure that we have the sample NuGet packages installed. So right click on your solution, go to manage NuGet. My big header is in the way there. But if you click on manage NuGet, there we go, this one here. Now, what we need to do here is make sure that we're searching the pre-release. So you need to make sure that this thing is ticked. Now, if I click on my installed, you can see I've got this smartcomponents.aspnet.core. You can also see I've got smartcomponents.inference.openai, and I've also got smartcomponents.local embeddings. Alternatively, if you're not a fan of the GUI, you can type in this NuGet command. Now, just like any other .NET component nowadays, after you install something via NuGet, you also need to register it in your program.cs. Now, I'm going to come back and look at all of this in more detail when we look at each individual smart component, but the key thing that you need to make sure that you add in here is this builder.services.add_smart_components. So this line is key, and we'll cover all the different bits and bobs later on. With the smart components registered with the framework, the next thing is to install the tag helpers. So to do this, if we go to our Solution Explorer, within Views, you should find your _view imports. And within this file, you'll need to make sure that you have this @add tag helper, then *, smartcomponents.aspnet core. So that covered all the steps to install these smart components into a .NET website. And the final task that we need to do is set up our AI server connection string. So the first step to configure our AI connection string is to add some config within appsettings.json. So the config we need to add is this block here. So we've got smart components, and then for this video, we need self-hosted equals true. Our deployment name is the model that we installed, so LLama2, and then the endpoint is going to be localhost, and this is the default port that Ollama uses. Now, it's probably worth mentioning that if you are more interested in just setting up your smart components to talk to the OpenAI endpoint directly, or you want to spin up an AI server in Azure, then you can figure out how to install and configure everything by going over to the .NET Smart Components GitHub, clicking on there, scroll down, you can see we've got the Blazor and MVC Razor page setup. So if I click on here, scroll down, and within the configure the OpenAI backend, you can find all the connection details here. So for example, if I just want to talk to OpenAI directly, in here you can see the config is slightly different, where we just put in an API key and the deployment name, so the model within, say, OpenAI that we need to use. With our connection string details set in appsettings.json, the final thing we need to do is add in this additional call onto add smart components. So with inference backend and then OpenAI inference backend. And with the setup all done, we're ready to look at these smart components. And the first one we're going to look at is Smart Paste. Smart Paste does exactly what you expect it to do. It's going to add in more intelligence for customers when they need to fill out forms on your website. So let's look at Smart Paste in action. So at the bottom, you can see I've got this single bit of text, and in it, it's got a name, it's got an address, it's got a city, and it's got an age. And when I click on my Smart Paste button, we're making a request to the AI server, and the smart components themselves, when it gets a response, it's going to add intelligence, and it's going to automatically paste in the relevant data into the relevant fields. So you can see here, it's figured out my name is John, and it's added it into the name. We can see that London has been added into address line 1, and you can see that London has also been added into the city. So obviously this is going to save your customers a bunch of time by being more clever about how they fill in a form. Now, for us developers, I'd say the caveats with using this Smart Paste is first, if you're using the local language model, you can see here that the AI, it's not ideal. So first off, we've got the name of type string is John. And I've got no way to configure this so far, so I can just get the value here. And this questionable intelligence is one of the limitations of using the local language model, because if you call the OpenAI server directly, you should get better responses added into your fields. Now, another thing is that you can see here that we've got the 23. However, it hasn't figured out that the age needs to be mapped here. You can also see that I've got this 123 Street Road, and it wasn't clever enough to figure out that this should be the value for address line 1. Now, another thing which is also worth mentioning is that calling the local AI server it takes about 5 to 10 seconds to get a response. And if you're using OpenAI API directly, this would be instantaneous. Now, even though I am pointing out a few of the little niggles, don't get me wrong, I'm really impressed with how these smart components work. And what's better is that installing these in your website is super simple. So now let's quickly jump over to the Razor view to see the HTML that you need to add in order to get this up and running. So to set up that form, within my Pages folder, you can see that I've got a folder called Smart Paste, and this can be called anything you want. And in it, I've got an index.cs HTML and a corresponding code behind. Now, if I open up the view, which is the more important thing, you can see that because we're using Razor Pages, I've got an at page and I'm importing the at smart components. Now, in order to create the form, we just use a normal form tag. We've got some inputs. Now, one thing that we can add within our input here is this attribute of data dash smart paste dash description. You can see here that I've got the word name, I've got the word age underneath, we've got the add line at 1, we've got the city. So all of this is pretty standard form stuff. And then underneath, all we need to do is this dash smart dash paste dash button. We can give it a default icon. Then we just put some text in the middle, and then that's how we close it off. And pretty much after we've got our smart components installed, this is all you really need to do in order to get that intelligence in a form. And this is so easy to set up, it's rude not to. The Smart Text Area component is going to add in a little bit of intelligence whenever one of your customers needs to fill in a text area. So let's say I put the word software bug here. You'll see that we've got a few seconds and we've got the auto suggestion nav we're aware of and working on it. Now, the caveats that I'll always keep referring to in this video, again, these components are beta and we're not using a properly trained language model, so we could get some better responses. However, it's very easy to see that implementing this feature on your website is going to make it much more usable for users to fill out the different fields and forms that you need them to. Now, in terms of implementation, again, within my Pages folder, I've created a folder called Smart Text Area, and I've got this index.cs HTML. Now, configuring this component is pretty simple. So again, I've got my at using smart components, and then actually adding the component to a page is as simple as adding this tag. So smart-text area, and then closing it off. So aside from just adding in the component tag, you can also add in 2 additional attributes. And the first one is mandatory, and this is the user role. So the user role needs to be a string, and it's going to describe who is typing in the area and for what reason. So you can see some of the examples from the documentation: an HR agent replying to inquiries from staff, an open source project owner replying to a GitHub issue. Now, the second attribute you can supply are user phrases, and this is an array of string. Now, this array will allow you to help train the model when it replies. So you can give your preferred tone and voice, you can give any common phrases you might want it to use, you can tell it about policies, URLs, or anything else which might be relevant in the results that it returns. So mapping that back to my code, you can see that I've got this user role string, customer looking for product data, and I'm adding it in with the user-role attribute and passing in that string value. And then we've also got my phrases. So I've got a few URLs here. And again, it's the user-phrases attribute, and we pass it in. Now, because I'm using my local language model, I've found that this user role, this phrases, is not that great. However, when I've seen the online demos that use OpenAI, this is really handy. So again, this is very simple to set up. And now we're ready to look at the last component. And be warned, this is slightly more trickier to configure. The Smart Combo Box component is going to add in intelligence when your users are filling in combo boxes on your website. Now, in order to get the Smart Combo Box to work, you're going to need to hook it up to an API. Now, there's basically 2 modes how this component works. Now, the first one doesn't really have any intelligence, I'm not sure why you'll use it. You can see here I'm typing in Jeep. I'm just getting a generic list of all the data returned from the API. Now, if I look at the second example where I'm using this thing called an embedding, if I type in Jeep now, you'll see that it comes top of the list. So we can see that this is now using AI to filter out my API data. Right, so we're back inside program.cs, and the first thing we can notice at the top is this using. So we've got this using smartcomponents.local embeddings. Now, if I scroll down, the next thing we need to do is register this local embedder. So builder.services.add singleton local embedder. Again, we just need to do this for combo box. Now, if I carry on scrolling down, you'll see that we've got my two different API setups. So the first one is the Dharma suggestion. So you can see here, I've got a very stupid mock API. So I basically just got an array of strings. It's got a bunch of different car manufacturers in it. And then you can see here that I've got a map smart combo box. I'm passing in this API, and basically I'm just passing back this data. So this, as we saw, was stupid. It didn't really do any filtering. All it basically did was return this list of strings to my combo box. Now, in order to add AI and get better filtering, we need to use the local embedder. So you can see here on line 51. So the first thing we do is app.services.getRequiredService local embedder. Now, after we have our embedder, you can see here that we've got the embedder.embed range and our categories. So in this example, I'm just passing in this array of string. However, what you could do is call an API and get your API data returned as a string and add it this way. Now, underneath here, you can see I'm doing app.map.smart.combo.box. This time I'm just putting in a different API name, so API/clever API. And then you can see here I'm doing the embedder, and then the clever bit is this find closest. And you can see here that I'm passing in the query being requested. And you can see here I've got my embed range. So the embed range was this embedder that we created here. Now, just in terms of the HTML, if I go to my smart combo box, so again, it's in pages, I've got an index.cs HTML. This is very, very simple to implement. You can see that again, at using smart components, the tag I'm using is smart-combo box, and then we just pass in the URL of the API that we want to call, which we defined in program.cs. And that's all we need to do to have intelligent combo box sorting. And that is everything that you need to know in order to get going with these brand new smart components. Now, for me personally, I think these components are absolute belters. I mean, being able to add in AI as simply as these components allow us is a big win for us .NET developers. However, I'm also interested to know what your opinion is. So even though they are in beta, can you see yourself using this in production? Let me know in the comments. Now, before we part ways, do not forget to click on the like and also smash subscribe if you want to learn more about .NET. I do videos every single week aimed at making people more informed developers. And the final thing that I have to say is that if you're interested in learning more about .NET, then I've created a video all about the best .NET NuGet packages that you can add in your project. So the link to that is on screen right now. So check that one out. Otherwise, until next week, happy coding.